Welcome to Qt Widgets and more. Today's episode is going to be slightly different from what you've seen before. It's namely going to be a sneak peek into one of the episodes from Programming with Qt Widget. You might have noticed that we're putting out a training course on all of Qt Widget, and one of those episodes is about layout management, and especially about stretching, spacing, and size policy. Not your most easy accessible topic. So please do enjoy today's broadcast together with Programming with Qt Widgets. Hopefully by now you have a pretty good idea about what layout management is all about. There's more to it than what meets the eye. And let me just draw a simple drawing for you here to discuss some of those more important issues. So I have a dialog here. Try and implement this shape in Qt Widgets, Anyway, my dialog has a checkbox. It has a label, a line edit. It has an OK button down here. That's the typical content of my dialogs, it seems. Whenever the dialog resizes, or whenever the dialog is shown in the first place, it needs to resize and move the content of the dialog. So if you imagine that I made it wider, then more space should go to that line edit in there. Or if the first time when I showed it up, obviously the items need to be placed. So if I have a layout manager associated with it, it would look like this. This is my layout manager, and enjoy the roundness of my circle. I'm drawing this by hand to give you a very clear emotional reaction to that the square and the circle are different shape, because my square is a Qt Widget subclass. My circle is a layout manager, and layout manager has absolutely nothing to do with the Qt Widget class. Well, they work together, but it's not a subclass of Qt Widget. So you cannot make your widgets children of layout managers. But what will happen here? Well, what will happen is that whenever I show my dialog for the first time, the widget will realize I need to place and resize my items. It won't do that itself because it has a layout manager to do the job. So we'll call an API on the layout manager, and it might be a very surprising API for you, because the API is called help ! Now you're asking, can you even have an exclamation mark in a method name? It's not the real API name. It's calling do layout or whatever, something boring. What the layout manager is doing, and let's imagine this is a horizontal layout manager. Let's imagine that it's only working for these two widgets here. That would be a vertical layout manager working on from the top down, and then we have the horizontal part in there. And now this layout manager, what it will do is it'll go over and call onto these two widgets here. It'll call a method. It'll call two different methods. First of all, it will call a method saying, hey, widget, in a perfect world, what size would you like to be? And the label would say, well, give me 300 pixels. That would be awesome, because then I can show everything that needs to be shown here. And the line editor will say, well, in a perfect world, give me 400 pixels. Then there's enough text space here to be showing this. And what it's basically is asking is, it's calling a method on these that is called sizeHint. Okay, imagine that I was actually resizing the dialog a bit below the sum of the sizeHint of these two. Then the layout manager would all of a sudden realize I cannot give them both what they want. What I'd have to do now is to ask them, would it be okay with you if I make you a bit smaller? So it would ask again the label, in a perfect world, I know that you want 300 pixels, but it's not a perfect world anymore. Can I give you a bit less? And the label would say, no, beep, wait, can you give me less? Because then I cannot show all the characters. The line editor, on the other hand, will say, okay, seriously, if I can only show 3 letters, but if that's what you want, then you can squeeze me down to 3 letters. But that is my final offer. And the method name, or the method that it will call, is minumumSizeHint. So it'll call minumumSizeHint on these 2 to get an idea. In addition to that, there is a bit more that's going on. It would also call on the layout manager will itself look for any stretching setup, and we'll see that in a few minutes. And it would even go to the widgets and ask for their size policy, which is a way of the widgets to tell the layout manager about its preferences. So the size policy for the label in its horizontal direction would be that, hey, you can give me more space. I'll not be able to use it for anything, but don't give me less than my sizeHint. So the relationship between the sizeHint and the minumumSizeHint and the stretching and the size policy is rather complex, but in the day-to-day work, it just works out. It's perfectly okay to pause here to let it all sink in. We had the sizeHint, the minumumSizeHint. There's actually a bit more to it. But let me show you a slide here. On managed widget, that is widgets where their parent has a layout managers associated with them. On those widgets, you should never call set geometry, which is just resize or move in one go. Never call set geometry, resize or move. It's okay to pause again and think of, why would that be? Well, because as soon as the widget, the parent, is being shown or resized or whatever, it will ask its layout manager help, and the layout manager will go and do those things. So if you call resize or move on these, it will just be a no up, because as soon as the widget is shown or as soon as it's being resized, it will be overwritten. So what do you do instead? Well, you use the sizeHint and minumumSizeHint to give your preferences on what size your widget should have. And that is if you are a widget author. That means that if you're sitting there and saying, I would like to create a new widget that should be, I don't know, a silly example, a compass widget. So you'd like to create a compass widget. And there you'll be sitting there and say, and you'll do again, my compass widget would really be difficult to operate and to get a visual idea of its size if it was less than, say, 400 by 400. But if it was in a layout that really needed the extra space because something else important was on the screen, then we could go down to 300 by 300. That's the sizeHint and the minumumSizeHint as an author of that widget. You cannot call sizeHint and minumumSizeHint from outside because they are virtual method that you can override. But if you're from the outside, just want to tweak a bit, you have a label that you want to be a certain width so that there's some space in it for whatever reason, then what you can do is call one of these 3 methods here, set fixed size, set minimum size, set maximum size, and there's even the same version with width and height, so set fixed width, set fixed height, and so on. And what you specify in there is that you say, well, it shouldn't be less than this width, for example, the set minimum width. And what Qt will then do is override the answer from the sizeHint or the minumumSizeHint in this case to take yours into account. So never, ever call any of these 3 methods on a widget that has a parent that is in a layout. So that was sizeHint and minumumSizeHint, and the set minimum, maximum, fixed width and height and size. But how do you specify if you have 2 line edits next to each other? They would obviously have the same sizeHint. How do you specify that when you resize the dialog, that one should get more of the additional space than the other? Well, that you specify when you programmatically add the widgets to the layout managers. And if you look here on my screen, you can see we have the Q box layout. So that's the H box or V box layout. The method add widget that we've seen in action so many times actually takes a second parameter, and that is a stretch. And what that means is not how many extra pixels it should be getting. The unit for this is just a number, a fraction of the available thing. It's not an absolute number in itself. But when you look up here, if I had 3 widgets next to each other and I said add stretch, this widget, comma 2, add stretch, this widget, comma 1, add stretch, this widget, comma 1, then this one would get 2 divided by 4 of the available space. This one would get 1 divided by 4 of the available space, and this would get 1 divided by 4 of the available space. So I would see exactly the same user interface if it said 20, 10, 10, or pi, pi, 2 pi, except that I cannot do double values here, but in theory at least. There is a corner case, namely, what if it says 0? If I had the add widget and didn't specify anything, well, then 0 means just give me what my sizeHint asked for. Do not give me anything additional. I can also add space in between. You've seen that numerous times in layout where the OK and cancel button is sitting there pushed all the way to the side of the dialog. In Qt Designer, you'd add one of those spaces in your layout. But what you do programmatically is that you would just call add stretch. So if I want a stretch and then the 2 button, then I would say layout add stretch 1, for example, and then layout add widget OK, layout add widget cancel. And then the stretch will take all the space, then the OK and cancel. And given that the OK and cancel did not have a number specified there, they would just get their sizeHint, exactly what you might want. For grid layout, we have the same thing for stretching rows and stretching columns. And actually for box layout, if you add to not the closest one, not the add widget, but the add layout, then you can also, so you have a horizontal layout inside a vertical one. And then when you add the horizontal to the vertical, there you can specify the stretch when you add the layouts. Now let me show you what all of this looks like in Qt Designer. So here I have the example from before. I have 3 line edits now, and I want this one to stretch with 2 and these one with 1. So how do I specify that? Because programmatically, how I specified it was when I did like this and then like this, namely the add widget. But I don't have an add widget in this setup. What I can do then is I can see the layout that I got out of this, and here are my stretch factors. So these would be 2, 1, 1, and you can see that when I resize it, this one gets twice as much as these. The add stretch down here for the button to push it over, well, again, that's the process of add stretch, but here I can simply specify it here, and you can see my button is being pushed over to the side all the time. Let me also add to this beautiful layout that I already have here. Let me add 2 Q text edits, if I can find them. Display widget, input widgets, plain text edit. We can do that. We can do that. Plain text edit. We have 2 of these. And now I create a layout for the background here, put them all into a horizontal layout. And when I resize my dialog, these 2 get exactly the same amount of stuff. But if I want this one to be growing and this one just to have its fixed size, what I can do again, I can choose the background. That's the widget that we have here. I can scroll down to the bottom where I will see my layout manager. Choose it, scroll down to the bottom. Where's my layout manager? It's supposed to be sitting down there. That's the layout manager for this part. Choose the widget, and oh, for some reason it didn't show up. So here it is, my layout manager. And now again, you can see layout stretch, and that is how the items of this layout manager. And the items of this layout manager are these 4. This row, this row, this row, and this row. And that's what you see 4 down here. So if I change just this single one here to a 1, then you can see it is the one stretching whenever I'm resizing. This is slightly annoying, I admit, because you break your layout from time to time to redo stuff, but maybe try and make that a habit of not breaking the layout unless you really, really, really need to. If you're as old as me, you will likely remember a TV series from the late 70s called Soap, and they always ended every episode of, "Confused? You won't be after this next episode." And, well, then you were even more confused. Let's get back to Qt Designer now, because I want to show you an alternative way of specifying the stretch factors that will obviously not make you more confused. So in Qt Designer, we added a stretch factor. Let me just select this layout manager again. You can see the 2, 1, 1. If I now delete those, then you can see they are back to the 1, 1, 1 or 0, 0, 0 in the stretching here. What I can do is that I can select one of these, and I can go down and I can find the size policy, because the size policy also have a stretch factor. And horizontal stretch factor, if I give this 2, then you can see it takes all the additional space. And 1 over here for this one, 1. Then let's resize it really big now. Then you can see this one gets all the, this one gets its size hint. Oh, it's so difficult to talk about. This one gets the size hint, this get 1, and this get 2 in additional space. But let's go down and choose the layout manager again, and then change it to 2, 1, 1. Then you can see this version down here wins over the size policy. So make up your mind. Are you going to do with this one or with that one? That's up to you. Unfortunately, if I go in the other direction, then I'll still need to use this one down here. So if I choose the layout or the whole dialog, then I always need to go in this. So the closest to the widget, the layout manager that is touching the widget, so to speak, you can go with the size policy, which is my preferred in there. But that one, the layout manager, which is laying out other layout managers, you need to lay it out down there. And why would I not always just lay it out down there? Well, because the second when I do this, because I needed to reorganize something, then I add the layout manager again. Well, what would I reorganize? Maybe these two should go next to each other, and then add the layout manager again. Then you can see that the stretch factors down here has been deleted. So adding the stretch factors to the size policy is just slightly more stable in the face of breaking your layouts. And we're not done yet, so hope your confusion is still not at maximum, because we also have the ability to add spaces around the layout manager. So when you have the layout manager, you can add the stretching and for each of the items in the layout manager, but outside of the layout manager. On the left, the right, the top and the bottom of the layout manager, you actually can specify what amount of pixels should be in each of those. And you do that using, as you can see here, a method called set content margins, left, top, right, bottom. Let me just let you in on a secret. I never ever called this method except with 0, 0, 0, 0. It would be way too much to get into the discussion on that right now. So bookmark this link here to Qt Widgets and more, where I talk about exactly this method. Okay, confused? Well, let me show you a bug in Qt. You already saw the one in Qt Designer, but a design bug in Qt, a very rare one of those. We have it right on the screen now. What you see here is size policy. That's this class called Qt size policy. You can get the size policy from the widget by calling size policy, And you can set the size policy back on the widget by calling set size policy. That's where I think that this is an API bug in Qt. And let me just elaborate a bit. So the size policy, first of all, what is that? Well, it is the widgets telling the layout manager about its preferences for being resized. So think of a line edit. It would make absolutely no sense to make a line edit taller than what the sizeHint was, but it would be okay to make it wider. So that's where the line edit will tell the layout manager that's looking at this layout, this line edit, that, hey, you can make me wider, but not taller. And that is exactly what the sizeHint is about. It's something that the person who did this and implemented that widget, which my compass widget again, implementing that compass widget would be sitting there and saying, horizontally, vertically, yeah, you can make me bigger, that's perfectly fine. You can make me smaller than the sizeHint. It wouldn't look good, but it's okay. But it's not something that you should do from the outside. I know that we just modified the sizeHint from the outside in Qt Designer, and that is likely why it is available from the outside. So you could do it in Qt Designer. But from a pure API point of view, the sizeHint should be something that the widget does. And how do you do those? With setters and getters? No. You do those with virtual methods. And I spend a lot of time now just so make sure that you don't get lulled into thinking of sizeHint or size policy. Sorry, that size policy is something that you should do from outside of the widget. In most of the cases, it's a tool that you should be thinking about when you implement a new widget. And funnily enough, talking about implementing new widgets, that's what the next episode will be about. You can read what's left here on the screen, and most noticeable, go and read the Q size policy documentation, because the different size policies are available there. I tried in almost 100 classes now to explain that to people. I always get it wrong, so I'm not going to do that here on the camera. That's it for this episode of Qt Widgets and more. No, that's the wrong episode. That's it for programming with Qt Widget. It's been a long episode, but man, did we get into a lot of details. And I hope that I'll see you in the next episode. And also great. Until then, have a great